Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, distinguished members of the Court, it's always an honor to speak before you, and a particular honor to do so today in the present circumstances to support Armenia. My presentation will be devoted to the necessity to protect the right of Armenia and Armenians to enjoy, without prohibited discrimination, their cultural and religious heritage. Article 2 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination obliges the states parties to recall, and I quote, to engage in no act or practice of racial discrimination. Furthermore, Article 5 of the Convention imposes that one ensure without prohibited discrimination the enjoyment of the rights stated under it. Amongst those rights is the right to freedom of religion, and I quote, also the right to equal participation in cultural activities. It cannot be denied that the right to freedom of religion includes the right to practice one's religion in habitual places of worship, and thus the right to see these places respected and preserved. Likewise, the right to participate in cultural activities implies that the heritage serving the purposes of such activities be respected and preserved. And furthermore, of course, many places of worship are part of the cultural heritage. Thus, the religious and cultural heritage is likely to be protected under the Convention when it is established that it is attacked for a ground forbidden by it. The rights that Armenia asks you to protect in matters cultural, not only are they plausible ratione materiae in the light of the Convention, but also, and I will come to this, with regards to the facts. On the 8th of October 2020, Madam President, the Holy Saviour Cathedral in Shushi was twice bombed. The first attack took place around 12 o'clock, the second around 5 p.m., whereas there was no combat or other bombardments around that place on that day. These are well-documented facts, and following an inquiry undertaken in situ, Human Rights Watch concluded that the cathedral had indeed been intentionally bombed by two well-targeted volleys, and everything could lead one to think that these attacks were perpetrated by Azerbaijan that was besieging the city. To date, the defendant has not adduced any other credible explanation about these acts. The Cathedral of Shushi was coldly and deliberately pounded twice on the same day, so that the deadly message thus sent be perfectly clear. The Armenians do not have any place in Nagorno-Karabakh and will never be in security there, not even in their most sacred spaces. The bombing of the cathedral in reality was just a warlike prelude of a policy that was to manifest itself immediately after the ceasefire and extend till today. Madam President, evidence of cultural destruction that I shall adduce are numerous indeed. Armenia's application with regards to this contains many references to available documents on the internet. Some have been reproduced in our annexes. With the corroboration of photos or videos, this evidence appeared in the media and social networks. Tallying with each other, this evidence was collected and checked by satellite images through Caucasus Heritage Watch, a research initiative undertaken by archaeologists from the universities of Cornell and Purdue in the United States. The complete reports of these archaeologists are to be found in your hearing file, tabs 13 and 14. A few days after the 10th of November, the cathedral was yet again the subject of racist attacks, during which its walls were daubed with graffiti, whereas the statues of angels ornamenting the railings surrounding the cathedral were deliberately damaged before they disappeared. Since then, Azerbaijan has undertaken what it calls restoration of the cathedral work. It removed the spire on top of the choir tower so as to return it to its original architectural so-called style and to return to the historical image of the town. But let's look at this more closely. Built between 1868 and 1887, when the region was part of the Russian Empire, here is the cathedral now on screen as it originally appeared, with its spire before the anti-Armenian pogroms of March 1920. Following the ethnical recomposition of the city caused through these dramatic events, the spire of the cathedral was removed and the religious building ceased to be maintained during the Soviet period. The cathedral resumed its original aspect in 1998 before it was bombed on the 8th of October 2020. Since then, Azerbaijan claims that restoring the cathedral could be done by removing its spire. Distinguished members of the court, in decapitating Shushi Cathedral, Azerbaijan intends to make it visible as from Stepanakert and reestablish the situation in which it was abandoned following the pogroms of 1920. And thus, indirectly, it recalls this memory. Claiming to reestablish the historical image of the city, Azerbaijan indeed reveals its policy of racial discrimination after having voluntarily destroyed the cultural heritage, the Armenian cultural heritage, by bombing it. Azerbaijan is altering, modifying what remains of it in order to diminish its presence. Through a letter of last Friday, transmitted less than 2 days ago, the Azerbaijan Vice Minister of Culture affirms that the work of restoration was undertaken in consultation with international experts. However, this internal letter in the government of the defendant doesn't prove anything unless it be its depravity. It's this letter, which you are asked to keep confidential, although it concerns a monument, manifestly was written and very cautiously formulated, framed for the purposes of the present case. And as you'll note, it's addressed to the person who's the agent of Azerbaijan in the cases submitted to your scrutiny. Furthermore, this letter states that experts would be consulted without actually naming them, nor saying anything about their visits or reports. And above all, it does not, this letter, indicate that Azerbaijan intends to rebuild the spire of the cathedral that its double bombing did not, however, succeed in striking down. The official position of the defendant is thus that the cathedral, in its original form, was without a spire, as you saw. And as you can see it again on screen, nothing could be further from historical truth. Still in Shushi, the Armenian Church of St. John the Baptist, also called the Green Chapel, was decapitated after the trilateral ceasefire declaration. In the village of Merkavan, which the defendant calls Jebrail, the BBC reported about the complete destruction of the church after it was vandalized by Azerbaijani soldiers. On the 27th of March of that year, Azerbaijani soldiers, through mockery, profaned the church of St. Yegishi in the village of Matagis, as you can see looking at the video under tab 5 in your hearing file. Very soon after the declaration of the 10th of November, Azerbaijani soldiers also went to Armenian cemeteries to cast down tombs, smash them and profanate them. Such incidents were reported on the 26th of November 2020, and then when spring came back in May 2021, in 5 places at least. In Adrut, north of Shushi, at Metztacher, at Taravard, at Shekhnach, where the old Armenian cemetery that went back to the 18th century was totally razed. evidence of such destruction are taken up in your hearing file, tabs 6 to 10. The destructive fury of Azerbaijan also covered Khachkars, a characteristic of religious art in Armenia, whose origins go back to the 4th century. A Khachkar is literally a stone with a cross, either a stele about 1.50 meters high, rectangular in shape, carved in low relief with one or several crosses, surrounded by ornamental decoration of human figures or inscriptions in Armenian. And since 2010, the Khachkars, Armenian Khachkars, are on the list representing the immaterial cultural heritage of humanity. In Shushi, the Khachkar of the bombed cathedral was then disfigured and destroyed at the late April this year. Furthermore, in territories that Azerbaijan claims to have liberated, Khachkars are torn down. This was the case notably on the 12th of January 2021 in Arakel, where the Azerbaijani armed forces knocked down a Khachkar through a military truck, as you can see in tab 11 in your hearing file. The cemetery at the north of Shushi, which was very considerably destroyed, had two Khachkars of the 12th and 13th centuries. Madam President, distinguished members of the court, such a gratuitous and discriminatory destruction seeks to erase the Armenian cultural presence in Nagorno-Karabakh. Further destruction is directed against Armenian memory. At late March this year, in Shushi, Azerbaijan destroyed the monument commemorating the genocide of Armenians perpetrated by the Ottoman Empire, which is to the left on your screen. Denying the existence of genocide, the defendant considers no doubt to be entitled to destroy this monument because it commemorates an event that, according to it, did not occur. To the right of the screen, you can see the location of the monument without the monument and without the inscriptions in Armenian on its surrounding wall. This photograph was taken during the presidential visit in June 2021. A flagpole, as you can see, with the flag of Azerbaijan has replaced the monument to the Armenian genocide. There could be no stronger symbol. President Aliyev making of the rewriting of history a central point in his ethno-nationalistic and discriminatory policy. Distinguished members of the court, there is no place, no room in the territories controlled by Azerbaijan for what makes and symbolizes Armenian identity. Madam President, during his speech before the General Assembly on the 23rd of September last week, thus after your court was seized by Armenia, and on the very day Azerbaijan filed in reply its own case introducing proceedings, President Aliyev on that date said this in his discourse to the General Assembly. In Azerbaijan, we cherish and support multiculturalism as a way of life. Azerbaijan is considered as an example of tolerance and peaceful coexistence of representatives of various religious and ethnic groups living in our country. End of quote. No doubt that your season prompted the defendant to present himself before you under the most flattering light. However, such official discourses of tolerance and inclusion, as well as the very recent exhibits established for the purposes of the present case, obviously sound hollow when they are confronted, as they should be and must be, when they are confronted with the reality of the facts that my colleagues and myself have just related. beyond the window-dressing speeches, these facts reveal the genuine nature of the Azerbaijani political regime and its hateful practices contrary to the convention. Madam President, distinguished members of the court, the official discourse of Azerbaijan is all the more misleading, and the destructions of the Armenian heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh are all the more foreseeable since they occur in a particularly worrisome context. And apropos this, I should like to propose 5 indisputable contextual elements. On the one hand, and you will have noted this through the chronology of the events, Azerbaijan undertook the cultural destruction and other breaches reported by my colleagues. At the time, it was engaged in negotiations started by Armenia pursuant to Article 22 of the Convention. Baku many a time declared to undertake these negotiations in good faith, though all the while accusing Armenia of not doing so. The duplicity of the defendant will not have escaped your attention. Furthermore, another flagrant case of duplicity, the official discourse of the defendant destined to chancelleries is very different from that aimed at its national public opinion. As Mr. Salonidis recalled, 4 days hardly after his speech before the General Assembly, President Aliyev addressed himself to his people by stoking anti-Armenian hatred, using very discriminatory and shocking terms. Furthermore, a third contextual element which is particularly worrisome, the destructions and profanations in Nagorno-Karabakh were and are still perpetrated in camera. UNESCO has still not been able to access the Armenian cultural sites, whereas the Deputy Director General of the organization on the 21st of December declared in 2020 only the response of Azerbaijan is still awaited for UNESCO to proceed with the sending of a mission to the field, end of quote. On the occasion of his New Year's message, in other words, 10 days after the solemn appeal of UNESCO, President Aliyev accused the international organization of lying and practicing a policy of double standards. And we know, too, since less than 2 days, we know that in August this year, Azerbaijan set aside a visit of UNESCO once again because notably its terms of reference mention Nagorno-Karabakh, an appellation which is henceforth rejected by the defendant, whereas the trilateral declaration of the 10th of November, which is binding upon it, uses that expression no less than 5 times in 9 paragraphs. So then, distinguished members of the court, that is the state of mind in which the defendants tackle the question of preservation of cultural heritage. It uses this to push its political agenda and force the hand of the international organization. And then the fourth element, contextual element that need be recalled, is due to the fact that Azerbaijan, alas, is accustomed with cultural destruction when it's a matter of attacking the Armenian historical heritage in the autonomous Republic of Nakhichevan, located in the southwest of Armenia. Azerbaijan has committed innumerable cultural destructions since its independence, especially in 2005. Baku raised literally the old cemetery in Jura, which had thousands of Khachkars, the largest collection in the world. These facts and others were duly documented, and we will return to them when we come to the merits of the present case. The International Council for Monuments and Sites, as well as the European Parliament, deplored and denounced what the press qualified as the worst cultural genocide of the 21st century, to quote it. Now, when faced with legitimate such condemnations, the reply of the authorities of Baku was to try to attempt to change reality. So from historical revisionism to negationism, there is indeed only one step that Azerbaijan blithely takes through the voice of its ambassador in London, whom I quote. First and foremost, we need to make it clear that there is no such thing as Armenian heritage in the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic simply because Armenians never lived there. Non-existing sites or cemeteries cannot be destroyed. And finally, and this is the fifth contextual element to reinforce the need to urgently to protect the Armenian heritage. Well, finally, Baku deploys the same historical revisionism with regards to Nagorno-Karabakh. Indeed, the destructions and profanations upon religious and cultural Armenian sites is accompanied with an official discourse seeking to make one believe that the Armenian heritage of Nagorno-Karabakh was a usurped heritage because the Armenian churches are monuments that belong to the Udi people, an Albanian Caucasian people whose trace we find in antiquity, and that the propaganda of Baku considers as being proto-Azerbaijani. Posing in camouflage outfit before the church of St. Asastatsin in the village of Tsakuri. In March 2021, President Aliyev launched him into a diatribe propagating such a theory, claiming that the church was a former Albanian church upon which Armenian inscriptions could have been placed at a later date. The internet site of the presidency translated the speech of the head of state on video and film, and this is accessible on YouTube, tab 22 of your file. So changing historical narrative in order to justify such cultural destructions and to lessen the century-old presence of Armenia in Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan is also changing its administrative language. Referring to two of its recent decrees, President Aliyev declared during his speech of the 23rd of September last before the General Assembly, he stated that, and I quote, "There is no administrative territorial unit called Nagorno-Karabakh in Azerbaijan." Distinguished members of the court, what this apparently anodyne change, since it's a bureaucratic change, and what it conceals is basically the discriminatory, destructive and revisionist attitude of Baku with regards to authentic testimony of centuries-old Armenian presence in the territories under its control, that is to say, Armenian churches, Armenian cemeteries, Khachkars, and all monuments recalling such a presence. The conduct of Azerbaijan is manifestly contrary to Articles 2 and 5 of the Convention, because it is clear that the sole and unique reason for which Azerbaijan is striving as it does with regards to Armenian cultural heritage is precisely because it is Armenian. Distinguished members of the court, I would like to thank you for your kind attention. May I ask you, Madam President,